the inmate who survived death row longer than anyone expected. The metal door slammed shut with a deep echo across the silent tier. Guards rushed down the death row corridor as alarms began to ring through San Quentin State Prison. An inmate inside one of the cells had collapsed without warning after decades of waiting for execution. Officers called for medical staff, but one question spread quickly through the unit. How had this man survived on death row for so long when many others had not? What the guards were about to discover would reveal a story few people outside prison walls had ever heard. Because the man lying on that concrete floor had been there longer than almost anyone expected. His name was Clarence Ray Allen. Long before that night on death row, Allen had lived a very different life. Born in Oklahoma in 1930, he later moved to California and worked as a small-time business owner. But behind that normal life was a criminal operation involving theft and insurance fraud. In the 1970s, Allen was convicted for arranging the murder of a man connected to one of his schemes. For that crime, he was sent to prison with a life sentence. Most inmates would have faded into the system after that. But Clarence Allen did something that shocked prison officials. While already locked inside prison, he was later accused of organizing another deadly crime from behind bars. Authorities said Allen helped plan a triple murder in California while serving his sentence. The case shocked the justice system. Prosecutors argued that even inside prison walls, Allen still held power. In 1982, a jury sentenced him to death. He was transferred to death row at San Quentin, one of the most notorious prison units in America. Death row is a place where time moves slowly. Inmates live alone in small cells. They spend most of their day behind thick steel doors. Guards watch every movement. The air always carries the sound of keys, radios, and heavy footsteps. Many inmates break under that pressure. But Clarence Allen didn't. Years passed. Then decades. The prison changed. Guards retired. New inmates arrived. But Allen was still there. Older. Sicker. Nearly blind. Yet somehow, still alive. By the early 2000s, prison staff realized something strange. Clarence Ray Allen had survived on death row longer than almost anyone in California history. And soon, his final days would trigger a controversy that shook the entire prison system. By the early 2000s, the death row tier inside San Quentin State Prison had seen thousands of inmates pass through its heavy steel doors. Some were transferred. Some died from illness. Others were executed. But one man remained in the same quiet routine year after year. Clarence Ray Allen. By this time, Allen was no longer the man who first arrived on death row in the early 1980s. Age had taken almost everything from him. He was in his 70s. Diabetes had damaged his body. He had suffered heart problems. Prison doctors reported that he was almost completely blind. Guards often had to guide him when he moved through the prison. Yet even as his health declined, Allen remained at the center of a growing legal battle. His lawyers argued that executing a man in such poor health raised serious questions about justice. They pointed out that Allen could barely see and struggled to walk without help. Supporters said the system should show mercy. But prosecutors and victims' families believed something very different. They reminded the courts that Allen had already been serving a life sentence when he was accused of organizing the triple murder. To them, this showed that prison alone had not stopped him before. For years, appeals and legal challenges continued. Each time, Allen remained inside his small cell on death row, waiting as judges reviewed the case. Meanwhile, life inside the prison moved on. The death row unit followed a strict routine. Lights came on early each morning. Guards walked the tiers, checking every cell door. Meals arrived through small metal slots. Inmates spoke quietly through the bars or shouted messages down the long corridor. Most prisoners measured time by court hearings. Allen measured it by survival. Day after day, year after year, he remained there while other inmates around him disappeared from the tier. Some were transferred. Others reached their execution dates. Allen kept waiting. By 2005, something unusual became clear to prison staff and reporters following the case. Clarence Ray Allen had spent more than 20 years on death row. Few inmates in California had waited that long before execution. Outside the prison walls, The debate was growing louder. News stations reported on the case. Legal experts argued about the death penalty. Protesters gathered near the prison gates on certain days. Inside the prison, however, everything remained quiet and controlled. Until one winter morning in early January 2006. That morning, correctional officers received a message that had been years in the making. The courts had finished reviewing the final appeals. A date had been set. And after decades of waiting, Clarence Ray Allen's long survival on death row was about to come to an end. On the morning of January 17, 2006, the atmosphere inside San Quentin State Prison felt different. Guards moved through the death row unit with careful focus. Radios stayed close to their hands. Every door check, every step down the tier, followed strict procedure. Because that night, something rare was scheduled to happen. Clarence Ray Allen was set to be executed. For the staff working that shift, the tension was real. Executions were not everyday events. Months of preparation went into them. Special teams were assigned. Witness lists were confirmed. Medical staff stood by. But Allen's case had drawn unusual attention. He was 76 years old. He was almost completely blind. And he had now spent more than 2 decades waiting on death row. Outside the prison gates, news vans lined the street. Protesters and supporters gathered behind barricades. Some held signs against the death penalty. Others came to remember the victims of the crimes Allen had been convicted of arranging. Inside the prison walls, the focus stayed on procedure. Late that afternoon, guards entered Allen's cell. Following standard protocol, they informed him the time had come to move him to the holding area near the execution chamber. Because of his blindness and weak health, officers carefully guided him through the corridor. The walk was slow. The same concrete floors he had known for years now echoed under his footsteps one last time. Prison officials later said Allen remained calm during the process. Medical staff monitored him as required by execution procedures. Hours passed as final legal checks were completed. Even at the last moment, attorneys attempted emergency appeals in federal courts, hoping to stop the execution due to Allen's health condition. Judges reviewed the requests quickly. But the rulings came back the same. The execution would proceed. Shortly after midnight, Allen was brought into the execution chamber. Witnesses included correctional officials, members of the victims' families, legal representatives, and journalists. For many of them, the moment carried heavy weight. Allen had been part of the prison system longer than many officers working that night. And now, after decades of waiting, the final step in the legal process was about to happen. As the procedures began, the room fell completely silent. Every movement followed strict protocol. Outside the chamber, guards stood watch in the quiet hallway. The man who had survived death row longer than almost anyone expected had finally reached the end of that long wait. But what happened in the hours after the execution would surprise many people following the case. Because Clarence Ray Allen's story did not end quietly when the prison doors closed that night. In the early hours of January 17, 2006, the final procedures were completed inside San Quentin State Prison. After more than 2 decades on death row, Clarence Ray Allen was executed by lethal injection. Prison officials followed the same strict protocol used for every execution in California at the time. Witnesses remained silent as the process ended and medical staff confirmed the time of death. But outside the prison walls, the story was only beginning to grow louder. Within hours, news about Allen's execution spread across the United States and beyond. Major television networks reported on the case. Newspapers published headlines focusing on one detail that shocked many people. Allen had turned 76 years old only 1 day earlier. That made him one of the oldest prisoners ever executed in California. The case quickly became part of a larger national debate. Some critics argued that executing a man who was nearly blind, elderly, and seriously ill raised serious moral questions. They said the justice system should reconsider how long inmates remain on death row and whether age or health should affect final sentences. Others strongly disagreed. Families connected to the victims spoke publicly about the decades they had waited for justice. They reminded the public that Allen had been serving a life sentence when he was later accused of arranging the murders that led to his death penalty conviction. To them, the long wait on death row did not change the seriousness of the crimes. Inside San Quentin, however, the death row unit returned to its familiar routine. The morning after the execution, guards once again walked the tiers, checking every cell door. Metal trays slid through food slots. Radios crackled with quiet updates. The same narrow corridor that Allen had walked through for years was once again filled with the everyday sounds of prison life. But for many officers who worked there, Allen's case remained unforgettable. They had watched the slow passage of time from inside those walls. Guards who first saw Allen arrive had long since retired. Entire generations of prison staff had come and gone while he remained on death row. His survival there for more than 20 years became one of the longest waits before execution in California history. And even today, Clarence Ray Allen's story continues to be discussed whenever people ask a difficult question about the justice system. What happens when time on death row stretches longer than anyone ever expected? Subscribe if you want to hear the next real prison story.